Good morning, everyone. I hope your Easter weekend is off to a great start. I'm super excited because this morning we just launched our successfully propagating succulents course. And those of you who are on the email list, you probably saw the email already. But that is live, and then today we're going to answer your succulent questions. And hopefully the neighbor's dog is not too loud. But we've already had over 25 people join the course this morning, so I'm super excited. Thank you to those of you who've already joined. You've gotten an email, or you'll have an email in your inbox really shortly about how to access the course. And the awesome thing is, anyone who joins the course before Wednesday or through Wednesday, I will also be sending you, in addition to all the course material, which is all online, I'll be sending you a packet of 100 Sempervivum seeds. So I'm super excited about that. I have seeds, Sempervivums, that I'm starting right now to propagate. I did some last year, and that's one of the things I'm teaching you in the course is propagation from seeds, propagation from leaves, from cuttings, and then from offsets or division, pups, chicks, however you want to call that one. Has a lot of names. But I walk you through how to get started with those, and then also how to make it through those tricky transition periods. So with leaves especially, usually people are pretty good about getting started with propagating from leaves, but then there's this transition point where you have this little baby growing, but how do you actually get it into like adulthood? It's like it's a teenager, and it's just tricky to keep them alive through that period of time. So that's also something that I'm teaching you in the course. And then of course today I'm answering any and all questions that you have. So I have a list of questions that you guys have asked earlier this week when we did some Facebook questions, and I will be answering those. And those of you who are on live, if you have any questions or follow-up as we go along, be sure to leave a comment. If I keep looking down, it's because I'm looking at the questions and looking at comments and making sure that we're answering all of the questions that you guys have. So just making sure I have that all on. I should be ready to go. That's awesome. Thank you guys all for being on live. Oh, and then just one thing, if you haven't joined the course yet, if you didn't see the email or anything, there is a link in the description, or you can also go to succulentsandsunshine.com/propagate. But now let's answer some questions. So the very first question that we got was about leaf propagation, and it was, a lot of the leaves I removed for propagation are turning mushy and brown and dying. And I've just been leaving them to dry, haven't watered the soil yet, and I was wondering what might be happening. So this actually happens a lot more than people realize. Most of the time when we're removing leaves for propagation, we're removing the ones on the bottom of the plant, and those happen to be the least healthy, the oldest leaves, because obviously you don't want to like take off the center new growth that looks really pretty in the middle. And those lower leaves a lot of times are on their way to dying anyway, and so when you remove them, they no longer have access to the main succulent and all the nutrients there, and so they will die. And they do look like black and mushy and gross, like they've gotten too much water. Sometimes that can also just be caused by humidity in the air. Because they've been removed from that mother plant, they're stressed, they're gonna try and survive however they can. And one of the ways that succulents take up water is through the air around them. So if it's humid, you might be a little bit more likely to see some of those black, mushy leaves. Okay, and then let's see. What is the process, look up at you guys. What is the process for making new plants out of stem babies? I have so many and not sure how to do it. So I believe what you're asking is, like, you have the mother succulent right here, and then off of the stem there's just like a bunch of little plants growing off of it. So this could be, there could be a couple ways to do this, so I'll just talk through each of them. If you're growing something like an echeveria, where the baby is growing directly off the stem and has a stem of its own, you're going to treat that just like a cutting. So you'll cut off the plant, you'll cut off the baby, and I would cut it right off of the stem.
just because otherwise you have like this little stubby thing there and it's not really going to do a lot. But if you cut it right off at the stem, it might actually put out a new branch or stem there with a new baby, which usually happens with stem cuttings. So cut off that baby right at the stem. You can also just break it off the stem, just pull it right off the stem in the mother plant. And then it's really important that you let that stem dry. Kind of like we talked about just a second ago with like the leaves turning brown and mushy. If you plant that cutting right away, especially if you're planting it in wet soil, odds are it's going to start to rot before it actually puts out roots. So I would let it dry. It'll kind of scab over. Let it dry for maybe 1 to 2 days, 2 or 3 days to be safe, and then plant it in dry soil. Give it 1 more day, and then start watering. And I think this question is, I got this question later too, but if you are propagating from cuttings and you've planted the cutting, once it's planted, like I said, give it a day just to make sure it's super duper dry, and then you're going to water that cutting every 2 to 3 days, and for about probably 2 to 3 weeks, just watering it every 2 to 3 days, and then start gradually cutting back after about 2 weeks to every 4 days, and do that for a week, and then every 5 days, and do that for about 2 weeks, and every 6 days, and then just gradually cutting back until you're to your normal watering schedule for wherever you live. Which I know a lot of people just talk about it as like, oh, I water once a week. So if once a week is right for you, then with your cutting, you're going to gradually cut back on the watering from every few days to eventually get to once a week. Or maybe you're only watering every 2 weeks, and so you'll gradually cut back. And if you want to see if there's roots on that cutting, what I like to do is just slightly tug on the cutting. Don't like pull it all the way out, but just give it a little bit of tug. And if it has roots, if it's starting to develop roots, it will start to give some resistance. If there aren't any roots, it'll like come out pretty easily, and then just stick it back in. But that's why I say just pull it kind of gently, because you'll be able to tell like, oh, that just shifted a lot. It doesn't have any roots. Whereas if it has roots, it'll push back a little bit, and you'll feel like it would be hard to pull it out of the soil. So a good way to check for that. Okay, let's see. Okay, any advice about starting cactus from seed? So I'm going to just go over to the Facebook and make sure I'm not missing any comments real quick. So as far as starting cactus from seed, I personally prefer to just purchase seeds. I feel like they're a little bit tricky to harvest. Not that it can't be done, because obviously someone is doing it so that we can all buy seeds. But you have to, well, I'll just tell you how to get the seeds from the cactus, and then we can go on to like how to plant them. So if you are harvesting the seeds from the cactus flower or any succulent flower, you want to leave the flower on the cactus or succulent as long as you can and wait for it to dry up. And then once it's pretty dry, you're going to put a paper bag, like lunch bag, over the top and kind of close it off so that hopefully the seeds won't fall out, and then break off the flower into that paper bag. And then you're going to let that bag dry for another couple weeks. Most plant seeds in general are this way, where they need to be dried out before they will actually grow. So I would let them stay in that brown paper bag probably for, I don't know, another month or two, and just make sure that they are really, really dried out. And then if you've purchased seeds, or if you have just harvested some, then what you'll want to do is, I have found that it was easiest for me to propagate seeds on top of coconut coir. You could use like a traditional potting mix as well, but peat is just not great for succulents, which is what is in most potting soils. But the coconut coir is usually pretty easy to find, especially internationally. I know that is one of the soil components that I get a lot of comments on, like, oh yeah, I can find coconut coir. So that's what I like to propagate seeds on. And
you can get like, you know, the fancy little seed starter kits, or what I have done this time around that worked as well or better than the little greenhouse seed kit was actually just a leftover container. So we just have a leftover container with soil in the bottom, and it has a clear plastic lid. And so I put the seeds out, and they look like dust. They are tiny. Some cactus seeds, like my son right now is growing a blue cactus. I can't remember what its Latin name is, but with that, they're more like a poppy seed kind of size, so they're a little bit bigger. But most other succulent seeds are like dust. You can barely tell what's the seed and what's not. And you're just gonna sprinkle them on top of the soil. I would get the soil wet first. Sorry, that was an important thing to say. So get your soil wet, like really, really wet, and then sprinkle the seeds on top. You do not need to bury succulent seeds. You just sprinkle them right on top, and then put the lid on, and you're gonna leave them trapped in that like greenhouse effect under some sort of light. If you're indoors, you'll definitely want to put a grow light on it. Otherwise, they're not going to get enough from the window light. And then outdoors, put them in somewhere where they're going to get bright shade all day. You don't want it in direct sun because that extra heat could kind of scorch them and cause problems, make them too hot, and then they burn. But just somewhere with bright shade, and you're just going to leave it with that lid on until they start to look like little baby succulents. Usually they'll germinate probably within, actually the cactus we've had going right now for, it's been almost a month I think since I've started. The cactus haven't shown any signs of growth yet, but the sempervivums and the sedums that I'm doing, those sprouted within 2 weeks. And it is really warm here right now, so that's a pretty fast turnaround. If it's cooler, it'll take a little bit longer. And then eventually as they get bigger, then you'll take that lid off. And you just have to, once you take the lid off, you have to kind of pay attention and make sure that the soil is staying damp, not super soggy, but just damp. Because with seedlings especially, they need a lot of water because they're taking the water and then the nutrients from the soil and from the seed, and that's how they're growing. So they're gonna need a lot of water until they get to be a fairly substantial size and have a good root system. And once they are that bigger size, then you can gradually start to cut back. But I mean, we're talking like 6 to 8 months probably before they would get to that point. So until they are like, they're looking like succulents, they're looking like cactus, you need to keep giving them a lot of water. So that is seeds. And let me, oops, just look really quick. Oh, there we go. Oh, sorry, I'm trying to pull up the comments. Where did it go? Okay, here we are. Okay, cool. Okay. Ashley Marie, can you provide information for different zones? I feel like humidity has a huge part of leaf propagation. If we see leaves that are wrinkly and dry looking, can we try misting? Yes. So, yeah, honestly, if you're in a humid climate, you probably won't have to do as much work with your succulent leaves, the babies, because like I said earlier in the video, like they'll absorb water from the air around them. But with leaves, really in any climate, you're going to want to keep the soil damp. And the reason why I recommend keeping the soil damp is because then the roots will go right to the soil. They won't like go up in the air and somewhere crazy. The roots will go to the soil and they'll start growing down. And it's really important that the roots get covered when you have leaf propagation babies, because if the roots don't get covered, they're going to be a lot harder to stay full, and they'll dry out more quickly, which will pull more nutrients from the mother leaf, which is fine. The succulent baby is going to pull nutrients from the mother leaf, but you don't want to take it so soon that then you are the one providing all the nutrients. So, yeah, so just keep the soil damp. Misting works. I try not to get water on top of the leaves because I have noticed that sometimes with water on top of the leaf itself, it'll end up causing rot just because it'll linger there for a while. And this is something I haven't found a straight answer to, but someone told me, and I'm pretty sure, that succulents will actually absorb water through the leaf itself. Like the leaf will pull that water in, just like a root would. And so you don't want to leave water sitting on top of it. That has yet to be tested. I've yet to find a valid source for that. But I don't know if you guys know Laura Eubanks' Design for Serenity. It was something that she mentioned on her YouTube channel a while ago, and she does tons and tons of succulents. And I need to follow up and ask her about that and some other people and see what they think. But as far as growing in different zones, like humidity, well, let's go back to the other question. If you see leaves that are wrinkly and dry, can you mist them? Yes. So if your leaves are starting to wrinkle and look dry as opposed to like wrinkly, wet from too much water, then yes, I would give them more water. Leaf babies, especially once the baby's growing, it's pretty hard to rot them, at least in my experience. Once a baby is growing, I don't think I've ever had one rot. I've had them rot before, but I don't think I've had them rot after. So keep it wet. In a dry climate, you're gonna have to do a lot more of that. I know some people have asked, like, well, can I cover them like I would seeds? I don't know that much humidity is good for the baby leaves. It makes me a little nervous. And I guess that's kind of similar to the concept of doing water propagation, which I know a lot of you in the group have been doing. But again, it kind of comes back to, you don't necessarily want water sitting on top of the leaf. You want it in the soil so that the roots are reaching to the soil. The baby's getting the nutrients from the water, from the roots in the soil. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, and then Elizabeth Davis says, can I propagate jade cuttings and leaves the same way? If so, should I keep them separate or can I place them in the same planter? I would do leaf babies separate from cuttings. I mean, totally up to you. You could do it. And a lot of times it depends. Sorry, there are so many variables for things like that. But the downside to doing leaves and cuttings in the same container is that eventually your cuttings are going to need less water and your leaf babies are going to want more. But if you can kind of put the leaf baby like under the cutting, and I'll share a photo of this. I don't know if it's today or Monday that I have that. I was planning to share that, but if you put a leaf baby, like here's your main succulent, woohoo, and then you put a leaf baby underneath it, like right at the base of the plant, it kind of keeps it cooler and protected, and that's where the soil dries out the slowest. And so that works better because it does still have a little more access to water. You can propagate jade from a leaf, and I used to not think that was possible. I'd heard it, but I didn't believe it. But you can actually do it. So some of you might know Megan Milroy, who's been in the Facebook group, and she had some grow from a leaf. That was the first time I'd seen a person that I knew grow some from a leaf. And so I actually tried it with a Gollum jade, so the one that has kind of like the funky, like ogre ear. Well, ogre ears is a different one, but they look really similar. So I had a Gollum jade and I pulled some leaves off of it, and I finally got one to root. And I need to post a picture of that one because it's so adorable, because it has these little like donkey ear looking, ogre ear, I guess, looking leaves, and it's like a 1/4 of an inch tall. It's adorable. So yes, you can definitely do it. In my opinion and in my experience, it's a lot harder to propagate jades from leaves. Not that you have to do anything different. I just found the success rate is significantly lower. And I want to kind of play around with that and see if it's maybe just specific varieties of jade that are harder, or if I've been removing leaves in such a way that they don't work very well. But guys, I have so many things to share with you. I have another Gollum leaf that I ripped it in half when I was pulling it off the plant. So if this is your whole leaf and it's attached to the plant right here, when I pulled it off, it ripped right here. So half of it's still attached to the plant, and then this other half is broken off. And because I'm me, I just left it sitting on the soil to dry for a day or two. And I started watering it with all the other leaf propagations, and it's growing out of that like broken end. There's this tiny, tiny little root and a little plant that are starting to come out. And I just got a macro lens for my camera, and so we took a really cool picture of it, and I'm going to share it with you, and I'm going to keep taking pictures of it to show you because it's amazing. So sometimes that happens, and you get lucky, and it will do that. But honestly, I feel like that was just lucky. It had nothing to do with what I did. And I feel like you're a lot more likely to find success if you do actually remove it, like the entire leaf from the stem instead of just like ripping it. So yes, there's that. And then yeah, cuttings. So jade is a really good one though to do from cuttings. We kind of talked about this at the beginning, and I just realized that I moved on before I finished talking about it. But you let it, so with a cutting, you cut it off. If you're cutting off like the top of a plant, cut in between leaves and leave some leaves attached to the base plant so that it still has more plant matter to, take in light and chlorophyll and all that good stuff. Let it dry for a day or two. Plant it in dry soil, let it dry for one more day, and then start watering it. So that is with cuttings. But you might also have a plant like an aloe or a haworthia where they're growing pups like along the side. So they don't have a stem where a baby is growing off. And so in that case, you'll be just breaking apart. I'm using my hands, and you can't really see anything, but you'll just be breaking the pups apart from the mother plant. And you also want to let those dry for a good 2 days before you plant them. And again, plant them in dry soil, wait a day, and then water them. With pups, if they have roots attached, when you break them apart, they won't need as much water initially. You can probably water them every 3 to 4 days and then cut back within like a week. You could cut back to just watering a lot less because they already have that root system. So you just need to get it, excuse me, you just need to get it like solidified in the ground and show it that there's water coming, and then it'll do its thing and start growing. So yeah, great questions, you guys. This is fun. Okay. So that was cutting cactus from seed. Okay, so we've got a few more minutes. Anyone who is online, if you're on live, feel free to just leave a comment with a question, and I will answer those. I'm trying to give priority to anyone who's here live so that we can get some back and forth if you need it. But while we're waiting for that, I'm just going to go ahead with some other questions that we have from earlier in the week. Okay, so this is similar, I guess, to the question that we started today with. If the leaf gets mushy and still no roots, is it a goner? Anytime that your succulent leaf is black or like really mushy, just looks juicy, kind of like a jelly bean, but like really like a jelly bean, or a jelly bean that's been in water for a little while, you know what I'm talking about. Just like looks really dark and oozy, or at least transparent and oozy. That should be a real word, oozy. It's probably a goner. I always just keep stuff because I just want to see what happens. So I mean, you don't have to throw it out. You can leave it sitting on there. But usually once it starts turning transparent, if it doesn't have anything growing on it, it's generally not going to, it's not going to stay alive. So yeah, usually a goner. And same thing if it's like completely dried up and crispy. If it's just like shriveled a little bit, but there's still, some meat, I guess, in that succulent leaf, if there's still substance to the leaf and it's looking like it's drying up, it's probably just pulling those nutrients to push out a baby plant. So don't give up on it until it's like completely dried and crispy. But on the flip side, yeah, mushy, oozy, yellowing, black, like you kind of don't want to touch it because it just looks gross. They probably aren't gonna survive. And like I said, that can just happen because the leaf was old and it wasn't very healthy when you removed it. It can happen because there's too much humidity in the air, and then it could also happen from giving the leaves too much water. It can happen from water propagation. I know a ton of you have been successful with water propagation by actually putting the leaves in the water, and then also by just hovering them over the water. And so I'm not saying that that happens every time, but it's more likely to happen in that case because those lower leaves, like I said, are just not as healthy, and so they're a little more susceptible to rotting quicker when exposed to water because they get stressed. And, you know, we do stupid things when we're stressed, like eat way too much or eat things we're not supposed to. Succulent leaves are the same way. They're going to just like try and get as much water as they possibly can, and sometimes to a point where it will kill them. So it is a sad thing that happens, but thus it is. Okay, so, oh, okay, awesome. We have a bunch more questions. My screen just wasn't refreshing. Sorry, guys, but I'll try and get to all these. Is there any hope for succulents to thrive in a Zone 5 Southern Vermont, VT, Abby, without grow lights? Yes. So it depends on where you want to grow them. If you're growing succulents indoors, they can definitely grow without a grow light, but you're going to need them in like the brightest window possible. So usually that's going to be a south-facing window that gets light all day long, unless, like me, your south-facing windows are blocked by the house next door and you don't actually get that much light. In that case, I would do probably an east-facing window where it's getting the morning sun. West-facing window is okay too, but it gets hotter, and so in the summer, that can cause problems with sunburn, so I'd avoid that. But if you're in a Zone 5, shameless plug, but buy the course, and I will send you some sempervivum seeds, and sempervivums are winter frost, snow, ice tolerant, and so you could grow them outside all year round in Vermont. If you're a Zone 5, you'd be just fine. Like, that's what I was growing in Utah. My parents still have a bunch in their yard, and seriously, they've been under like a foot or two of snow for half, if not all of the winter. Chantel, you guys know, my super assistant, she also has some outside, I think. I could be totally making that up, but I think we've talked about this. But yeah, if you live in a Zone 5, go for sempervivums and sedums, and you can grow them outside. Or indoors, if you don't want to use a grow light, your best options would be Haworthia and Gasteria. Because those two, as long as you kind of restrict their water and don't water them a lot, they'll stay alive, but they won't stretch out as much as like an Echeveria or a Grapto something or other. Graptoveria, Graptopetalum, those tend to grow faster, stretch more, and need more light. So stick to kind of indoor varieties, and you should be fine. Okay, and Ashley just kind of updated us on hers. She was the one that was asking about different zones. She said we're super dry in early spring, but humid in summer. Yeah, so when you're growing, so you should start now. Like, start propagating now while it's dry. I guess with spring, you're probably getting into the humid. And then in the summer, those plant babies will love being outside when it's humid, as long as they're not getting too hot. And you won't have to water them quite as much, and they'll still stay pretty happy. Because that's the biggest thing with that transition period from being a tiny little baby to a big plant is they need more water. So a humid climate's going to be really good for that, as long as you don't get way too hot. Oh, Pamela said she's had a baby rot. If you happen to have a picture, Pamela, send it to me or post it in the group and tag me, because I would love to see that. I'm not saying it's not possible, because I'm sure it is, but I tend to err on the side of neglect. I just forget to water, which is probably why I haven't had one rot, but they do need more water, but apparently they can rot. And then Pamela also asked, what do you do with babies that elongate? So you can't like make them shrink back and not be elongated, but the best thing you can do is just ease them into an area that's getting more sunlight so that the new growth is more compacted. And when they're still little, just like half an inch or so, when they start to stretch out, you won't even notice the stretching. If you move them into, if you're easing them into an area with more sun, they'll stay compacted, and as they get bigger, that little quarter inch is not going to seem like very much in terms of stretching. So just ease them into more sun. But be careful with heat and direct sun, because you probably don't want your babies, for the most part, in direct sun unless it's early in the morning when it's cool. Okay, and then so we hit our time, but guys, I'm going to be back live. And so if you have more questions, or if you're watching the replay, if you have any follow-ups to things that we've talked about, just leave a comment. Chantel and I are going to be going in and we'll be copying out all the questions and making sure that we talk about them on Tuesday at 2 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. I'll be on live again for half an hour, and we'll just be talking mostly about propagation, but like Abby was asking about just growing in general, you can totally ask just general care questions like that. And if you felt like this was really helpful, part of what I am offering in the Successfully Propagating Succulents course is one-on-one help in answering questions like this. So if you want to join the course, just go to succulentsandsunshine.com/propagate. The link is also in the description. And if you buy before Wednesday at midnight, then I will also send you 100 Sempervivum seeds so that you can start growing those with me too. It's super fun. It is really time consuming. You have to have a lot of patience, so get ready for that. But it's so cool to see them grow. And my kids are doing it with me and they're loving it. But yeah, and then once you're in the course, then you can just leave comments in the course or email me with questions, and I'll help you get started with your own propagation, whether it's from leaves or cuttings, seeds, anything like that. I'm there to answer your questions, and we're like in it together. So I'm hoping that everyone who joins the course, we can all start propagating at the same time, and then we'll post pictures along the way, show each other how our leaves are updating, or seeds, and how much they're growing, any issues we're running into, and it'll just be kind of a good community support, help keep us all accountable, help keep us on track of watering and making sure we're being consistent, because I know for me that is the biggest struggle with propagation, is that consistency with watering. So I literally set an alarm on my phone to remind me to water my succulent babies every day, because where mine are outside here in Arizona, the soil dries out almost immediately because it's so shallow for the leaf propagation. So anyway, join me in the course, succulentsandsunshine.com/propagate. And then also be sure to come on live on Tuesday. We'll be doing another Q&A session. So if you come up with any questions in the meantime, leave them on the comments here or in the event, and we'll get those added to our agenda for Tuesday. Thanks so much, guys. Have an awesome day, and happy Easter.